Hlophe is a graduate, a PhD graduate from the University of Cambridge. By the way, peer-reviewed. He has been a professor for 9 years in South Africa, spanning from KZN, which is KwaZulu-Natal. He has also been a High Court judge for 29 years. And might I say, out of the 29 years, he has been president for 25 of those years. So, before I call upon him, I'd say that alone should tell you that if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Let me call upon to speak to yourselves and to read the President's statement, Dr. John Hlophe, and upon him concluding reading the President Zuma's statement and speech, he will then introduce President Zuma to come and address yourselves in the question and answer. Dr. Hlophe, Deputy President of Umkhonto weSizwe, please come through and address our members.
A very good afternoon to everybody here. May I take this opportunity, first of all, to thank the program director. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to deliver this lecture. May I also thank President Zuma for allowing me to do this on his behalf. Finally, may I thank Sompisi for your very kind introduction about me. You are very kind, I appreciate that. Our stay in Ghana is coming to an end tomorrow. I must say, Ghana, the Ghanaians are very warm. The first time I came across Ghanaians was when I studied in the UK. I found Ghanaians to be very warm, hospitable people, and highly educated, I must say, highly educated. We appreciate that. Now that you are used to my voice, let me do the job that I'm called upon to do. I can promise you I will stick to what I've been asked to do, neither more nor less. There is a reason for that. I would like the President to give me yet another opportunity next time. Thank you. Program Director, Your Excellencies, esteemed colleagues, distinguished academics, students, and fellow Africans. I bring you warm revolutionary greetings from South Africa, and I thank the University of Professional Studies, Accra, for inviting me to deliver this important lecture under a theme that touches on nothing less than the destiny of Africa. We gather in Ghana, the home of Dr. Nkwane Nkrumah, who taught us the following, I quote, "The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked with the total liberation of Africa," close quotes. We stand here many decades later, and I say to you, political liberation was achieved, yes, but economic liberation remains unfinished business. We are free in flag and anthem, but our currencies are hostage. Our economies are shaped not by dreams of our ancestors, but by the dictates of Washington, London, and Brussels. And the subject of today, de-dollarization, is the key to changing that tragic reality. Political independence without economic independence is slavery in disguise. Africa's transition from slavery to colonialism marked one of the most devastating shifts in the continent's history. After centuries of transatlantic stage trade, in which millions of Africans were uprooted, dehumanized, and sold as commodities, the 19th century ushered in a new form of domination and colonialism. European powers, in their scramble for Africa, violently stripped the kings, the queens, the chiefs, and other traditional leaders of their authority, undermining indigenous systems of governance that had long maintained social harmony and cultural identity. Entire communities were forced to abandon their languages, their traditions, and spiritual practices as colonial authorities imposed European education, religion, and political systems. This assault on African dignity not only eroded pride in heritage, but it also disrupted the continuity of cultural transmission between generations, leaving a legacy of alienation and fractured identities. Yesterday, the 18th of August, we had the honor of being invited by His Royal Majesty, King Takiteko Tsuru II, at his traditional council. In his address, he had this to say, I quote, "Our dignity cannot be in the absence of our minerals. They go hand in hand. If you want our minerals, then you'll have to respect our dignity," close quote. Colonialism was also marked by the wholesale plunder of Africa's natural resources. Minerals such as gold, diamonds, copper, and later oil were extracted in vast quantities, enriching European powers while leaving African populations impoverished and dispossessed. The wealth of the continent was exported to build foreign empires, while Africans endured forced labor, land dispossession, and discriminatory policies that entrenched inequality. The consequences of this exploitation remain visible even today. Many African nations continue to struggle with economic dependence, underdevelopment, and political instability, as the structures of colonial exploitation laid the foundations for modern-day corruption, unequal trade, and external control over the African resources. The violent disempowerment of traditional rulers and the cultural dislocation of colonial rule left deep scars that still influence African societies, shaping the struggles for sovereignty, cultural revival, and economic justice in the present era. BRICS, a rebellion against financial colonialism. To understand de-dollarization, we must revisit the story of BRICS. For decades after independence, African states turned to IMF and the World Bank for loans, hoping for development support. Instead, as Africans, we received debt traps and humiliation. The infamous structural adjustment programs of the 1980s and the 1990s forced us to privatize public services, devalue our currencies, cut health care and education budgets, and dismantle our local industries. What was the result of all of this? Africa became poorer. Factories closed, farmers abandoned their land, youth unemployment soared, national debt ballooned, and our economies were locked into exporting raw materials cheaply while importing finished goods at exorbitant prices. This was no accident at all. It was economic engineering, a deliberate design to keep Africa dependent and very weak. It was against this background that BRICS was formed. Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and then later joined by South Africa. It stood up and declared the following: enough is enough. BRICS was not created as a debating society. It was a rebellion against financial colonialism, an assertion that the global South must chart its own path in the world of economy. BRICS is not just an alliance, it is a revolution against the dollar empire. South Africa became Africa's gateway to BRICS. When South Africa joined BRICS in 2010, it was not as a junior partner, it was as Africa's anchor. We entered BRICS as the bridge that would connect the continent to this new global experiment. This mattered because Africa holds the resources that the world cannot live without. I'm talking about cobalt from the DRC that powers the batteries of electrical cars and cell phones. I'm talking about platinum from South Africa that drives the automobile industry. I'm talking about cocoa from West Africa that sweetens the world, oil and gas from Nigeria and Angola that fuel economies, African gold deposits from Ghana right here, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. These are some of the resources, natural resources, that are in abundance in Africa. Fellow esteemed guests, the winds of change are traversing our African continent. The power shift in the Sahel region are not coup d'etats. They are acts of African leaders taking back power from their colonizers and liberating their people from neo-colonial and neoliberal shackles of the West. These mineral riches have long been traded through Western-dominated systems that exploit us. By bringing Africa into BRICS, South Africa made sure that the continent would no longer remain a passive supplier of the products that I've referred to above, but would be an active participant in shaping global trade. Our examples show that IMF and the World Bank debts could be overcome. South Africa paid off its loans, not by begging, but by forging partnerships that respected sovereignty. And this all happened under the leadership of President Zuma. Africa does not need aid. Africa needs strategic allies, not aid. The BRICS Bank as a shield for sovereignty. One of the most powerful instruments of BRICS today is the New Development Bank, commonly known as NDB. Unlike IMF and the World Bank, the NDB does not impose austerity or structural adjustments. It finances infrastructure, energy, and trade without demanding that African states dismantle their sovereignty. This matters because the US dollar has long been weaponized. When a nation defies the West, it faces sanctions, exclusion from SWIFT, and economic suffocation. We saw this in the case of Zimbabwe, down south. We saw this in the case of Cuba. We also saw this in Venezuela and recently in Russia after 2022. This shows us a simple truth. The dollar is not neutral. It is a political tool used against the African people. The NDP, coupled with BRICS, pushes for local currency trade, which is the first real shield for nations seeking independence from this coercive system. The dollar is not money. It is a chain, and de-dollarization is the key. The cost of Western dependency. Let me speak frankly. Africa's dependence on the West is a form of slow death. Let me repeat that. Africa's dependency on the West is a form of slow death. That's what it is. We export minerals and crops at the lowest prices, only to buy them back as manufactured goods at 10 times the cost. We face tariffs on our exports, yet we are lectured about free trade. We borrow in dollars only for our currencies to collapse under exchange rate manipulation. And when we resist, coups are sponsored, leaders are assassinated, and sanctions are imposed upon us. This is not partnership at all. It is exploitation of the West order. The BRICS currency strategy offers us an escape from this reality. By setting trade in our own currencies, we can bypass the tyranny of the dollar. We can trade African oil for African grain, African gold for African technology, without involving the currencies of those who colonize us. Africa does not owe the West anything. Africa is owed everything by the West. Innovations in de-dollarization. We live in an age of digital revolution. New technologies allow us to build financial systems that cannot be controlled from Washington, London, or Brussels. Blockchain platforms, central bank digital currencies, and regional clearinghouses are being tested. Some African banks are already experimenting with cross-border payments in local currencies, a trend that should be promoted. This is the future. Bitcoin is often raised as an example. While volatile, it proves that currencies outside Western control can circulate globally. But we must not merely be spectators. Africa must design its own platforms. SWIFT is a colonial chokehold. Our own systems must be the arteries of Africa's future. If they can sanction our banks, we must build our own banks. If they can switch off SWIFT, we must switch on Africa. Some lessons for Africa's common currencies. What lessons can Africa learn from BRICS? The first is intra-African trade. The African continental free trade area is meaningless if 80% of our trade is settled in foreign currencies. A common African currency would reduce costs, expand markets, and build true African economic independence. Gaddafi's legacy. Muammar Gaddafi dreamed of a gold-backed African diner. He was assassinated not for oppressing his people, but because he threatened dollar supremacy. His blood is on the hands of those who fear African freedom His dream must therefore be resuscitated one day. Sovereignty is another lesson. A common currency is not just economic, it is political. It would make Africa a negotiating bloc of 1.4 billion people, not just 54 vulnerable states begging for trade crumbs. The Sahel Alliance, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are showing Africa that sovereignty is not a slogan. It is possible. Their rejection of neocolonialism is proof that Africans are willing to sacrifice everything for their freedom. Thank you. One Africa, one currency, one destiny. One Africa, one currency, one destiny. Let me repeat. One Africa, one currency, one destiny. That's the way to go, fellow Africans. Let me move on to bilateral relations and commendation to Ghana. Since the establishment of a formal diplomatic ties, South Africa and Ghana have signed over 24 bilateral agreements and memoranda of understanding covering critical areas such as trade, investment protection, double taxation, defense, transport, agriculture, ICT, arts and culture, and most recently, a visa waiver agreement for ordinary passport holders. These are some of the issues that are covered by the bilateral agreements between the two countries. In 2019, this cooperation was further elevated to the Binational Commission, commonly known as the BNC, at the presidential level, thereby ensuring structured follow-up and accountability. The significance of these agreements lies not merely in their signing, but in their effective implementation as they open pathways for deeper economic integration, technological exchange, cultural cooperation, and people-to-people connectivity. The Umkhonto weSizwe Party recognizes that Africa's liberation is incomplete without strong intra-African solidarity and will therefore continue to agitate for a robust and action-oriented diplomatic relations between South Africa and Ghana, ensuring that these instruments serve the real needs of our people, advance Pan-African unity, and resist external manipulation of our continental partnerships. I must pause here to commend Ghana for its bold step in backing Morocco's autonomy plan over the separatist agenda in the Western Sahara. Some may disagree, but I say Africa must not be divided for the convenience of the outsiders. The era of balkanizing Africa to serve foreign agendas is over. By prioritizing stability and integration, Ghana has once again placed itself at the forefront of Pan-African leadership. The Morocco Atlantic Initiative, launched in November 2013, aims to connect the landlocked Sahel to the Atlantic Ocean through infrastructure development and regional integration. This initiative, spearheaded by Morocco, involves investments in ports, roads, and railways to facilitate trade and economic growth for countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Chad. The initiative also seeks to foster cooperation in energy, security, and other areas. The initiative aims to transform the economies of Sahel countries by providing them with access to Atlantic and fostering regional integration. This regional integration must be the economic, trade, and currency bridge into BRICS, therefore northern and southern trade routes. That's what is needed. The days of Africa dancing to the drums are over. We shall beat our own drum now. Thank you. Umkhonto weSizwe Party, the future of South Africa. Umkhonto weSizwe Party's manifesto, which we refer to as the People's Mandate, outlines 8 pillars which serve as the foundation for our vision as a political party and policy proposals. Allow me to quickly go through them. The first is reclaiming our dignity. This pillar focuses on restoring the self-respect and pride of South African and the African people throughout the continent. The second pillar is reclaiming land and mineral resources. This pillar addresses the issue of land ownership and control over natural resources, advocating for policies that redistribute land and its resources. The third pillar relates to reclaiming people's power. The pillar emphasizes empowering citizens and giving them a greater say in the decision-making processes. The fourth pillar, reclaiming the economy. The pillar aims to address economic inequality and promote inclusive growth. The fifth pillar, building human capital and technological capabilities. This focuses on investing in education because we believe that there is no self-respecting country which does not invest in education. It also focuses on skills development and technological advances. Technological advancements, I beg your pardon. The sixth pillar, reclaiming spaces. This addresses issues related to urban development, infrastructure, and access to basic services. The seventh pillar being reclaiming safety and security. This pillar focuses on improving law and order and ensuring the safety and security of all citizens. The last pillar relates to reclaiming sovereignty and position in Africa and the world. This emphasizes South Africa's role and influence in the African continent and on the global stage. Together, these pillars embody the uncompromising vision of Umkhonto weSizwe Party as the only true hope for the last stage of the total liberation of the South African people. A liberation not just from apartheid's political chains, but from economic captivity, poverty, unemployment, near-colonial domination that continue to strangle our nation. Unlike the compromised so-called government of national unity, the MK Party represents the genuine continuation of the liberation struggle, carrying forward the spirit of our forebears to deliver full liberation, freedom, dignity, and prosperity to every South African citizen. The road ahead, this is now the call to Africa's youth and intellectuals. Comrades and friends, de-dollarization is not simply an economic debate. It is the new liberation struggle. It is the continuation of the battles fought by Nkwane Nkrumah, Lumumba, Nyerere, Sankara, and Gaddafi, to name but a few. But let us be clear. Presidents and governments alone will not complete this mission. It will be the women, youth, the students and scholars, the innovators of Africa, and the poorest and the downtrodden people of our continent who must carry this revolution forward. UPSA and every African university must become a workshop for sovereignty. Economists must design African financial models. Engineers must build African judicial platforms. Lawyers must craft African institutions of justice. Leaders must cultivate African unity. The West built its powers by chaining Africa. The new generation of Africans must build our own, must build our power, I beg your pardon, by breaking those chains. We must move from the classroom to the policy room, from the laboratory to the marketplace, from the lecture hall to the halls of power. Africa must produce not just employees for foreign corporations. Africa must produce inventors, great thinkers, and builders of the African systems. We are not beggars at the world's table. We are builders of a new table. I wish to conclude by saying Africa must unite. The power of Africa is in its unity. It is now or never. Long live Pan-African unity. Long live African sovereignty. Long live the dream of an Africa free, united, and prosperous future. I thank you most sincerely.
Thank you very much.